In this lesson, we'll learn about creating buttons inside our interactive InDesign documents. Okay, so in the previous lesson, we wrapped up a rather lengthy discussion about how we can utilize hyperlinks inside our interactive file here. Now, at this point, we're going to go ahead and move on to, I would say, probably one of the most important features for you to master when it comes to the interactivity inside InDesign, and that's the process and the usage of buttons. Now, we can create our own buttons out of objects here inside InDesign right from the Buttons panel. The panel is right here in my particular layout. Now you can see here that it has several options that are grayed out. That's because we don't have anything selected right now. Let's go ahead and talk about what a button is. All a button is essentially a catalyst for some type of action that's going to happen. Now we can create a button out of pretty much any type of frame or group of frames here in InDesign, whether that button is an image frame, whether it's a text frame, or whether it's just some simple graphics. Now I've created a couple of ellipses over here. We're just going to use this as sort of a sample button right now. So we're going to walk through the process of using the Buttons panel to create a sample button, and then we're going to go ahead and practice this over the course of a couple more lessons probably, and create some buttons for our layout. So let's go ahead and talk about the process of creating a button here first. Now you can see here that these two circles are not grouped together. Now if we wanted to create a button here in InDesign, we would need to first select the shape or shapes that we're targeting. Now we can create one button at a time, or we can create multiple buttons with multiple objects selected. Now from the Buttons panel here, we could either click on this little button right here to create the new button, or we could come up here and click on this normal appearance state right here. Let's go ahead and click on that Convert Object to Button right there, and you can see what happens here is we've created two buttons because those objects weren't grouped together. Now if I jump out of presentation mode by hitting W, we can actually see that there is a little button icon down here in the bottom right hand corner of each one of these shapes. There's also a very specific outline given to the button, kind of a dashed line with a solid line underneath it here. Now if you don't see these particular little icons in the bottom right hand corner, then you want to come up here to View, Extras, and make sure and show your frame edges. Notice the keyboard shortcut for that is Control H. If you don't have your frame edges visible, this is probably what you're going to see right here. So let me go ahead and show those. I would highly recommend working with your frame edges visible when you're working with interactive features here in InDesign, because there's actually several different icons that we're going to see throughout the course of creating these interactive features, or enabling these interactive features in our document. So go ahead and turn those on for me. Now I actually don't want to create two different buttons out of these two shapes. Let me undo that here, and I'm actually going to go ahead and group these together with a Control G before I go ahead and create the new button. So let me go ahead and click on Normal right here, and you can see again I've created a new button, and what we've got here is a little preview in that thumbnail next to Normal here. Let's talk about what's going on in this appearance frame right here. What we have here are called appearance states, and you can see here that we've created one. We've created the normal state. This is what that button is going to look like when the mouse is not interacting with it at all and we're not clicking on it. Now we can actually create up to two more appearance states for a particular button here. You can see we can create a rollover state for a button, and if we want to do that, all we need to do is click on rollover there, and you can see that that rollover state appears. And we can also add a click appearance state. So the rollover is going to occur when the mouse rolls over the button that we have selected or targeted. A click appearance state is going to happen when somebody clicks on the button. So each one of these states can be modified independently of one another. Let's go ahead and, with the rollover state selected here, let's go ahead and come in here and double click on that button, select just this blue circle. We'll come over here and change the color of it, make it orange. And now when we come back to the Buttons panel, you can see that the thumbnail next to that appearance state has changed. So we have the original state here, the normal state, then we have the rollover state. Now we could actually go ahead and create one more state here. We'll go ahead and click on the click state, And let's go ahead and change this particular blue circle. Let's change that to green, just so we have three completely different states here. All right, great. Let me go ahead and click away from that and then click back on our button to select it here. So, okay, great. So now we've created all three of our appearance states. Now, let's go ahead and before we move up here to this top half of the buttons panel, let's go ahead and switch gears for just a moment. Let's go ahead and talk about ways that we could maybe preview our button. Now, we have a couple of options. We could export a PDF or a flash file, and that'd take a little bit of time, but that would let us preview what this button's going to look like. Well, there's actually a better way to do that. We actually have access to the preview panel, and that's up here. It looks like a little monitor with a play button in it. And if I click on that here, you can see why I've arranged that at the top of my workspace. I like to stretch it out here and get a nice big preview. Now, let's talk a little bit about these three buttons right here. These are going to be kind of important. This third button here is going to allow us to preview the entire document. This is a 10-page document. It'll take a little bit of time to generate that preview. If we click on this button, it'll preview just the selected page or spread. That one might be a little bit faster. Now, when you're working with rather large interactive files, it's probably going to benefit you to use this particular option right here. This will allow you to preview only the selected information. So if we come over here, and you can see here I have this button selected, and we hit the play button, notice we just get this button, and when we mouse over it, there's our rollover state, and if we click, you can see there's our click appearance state. So we've got three different states, and we're previewing them here. Now, the cool thing about these other two ways of using the preview panel is there's keyboard shortcuts for those. If we wanted to preview just the page that we're working on, we could hit Control-Shift-Enter, and it's automatically going to jump you to the preview panel and give you a preview of that page. If we wanted to preview the entire document that we're working on, we could hit Control-Alt-Shift-Enter, and it'll give us a preview of the entire document. Those are a couple of really good keyboard shortcuts to remember. Now, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this down, and let's jump back over to the buttons panel here. And we're going to talk about some of these other options. Now, the hidden until triggered, we're actually going to touch on that in the next lesson, but let's talk about this button down here next to the trash can. This button right here will allow us to convert the button that we have here back into a normal object. So what you need to know about this, though, is that whichever state we have selected here is the state that's going to be kept. The other two will be discarded here. So if we wanted to keep the, let's say, the rollover state, we'll just click that button and hit OK on that. And notice we get a grouped object here. If we hit Control-Shift-D to ungroup, we've got our two shapes. We've lost the blue circle, we've lost the green circle. Let me undo back a few times here, back to where we have a button. Now, we can also hide these states. We can hide them or disable them by clicking on the eyeball right here, and that will actually disable them. Now, if we wanted to completely delete one of these states, we can just select it here. I'll just select click and delete it by hitting the trash can. Alright, great. So what we're left with here is our normal and rollover state. And now we need to tell our button to do something. So let's bounce up here to the top half of the buttons panel. I'm going to come over here and let's give our button a name. We'll just call this test button. And now we have an event drop down here. So you can see the default event is on release. And if we drop this down, you can see that we have an event for on click as well. Now I'd probably go ahead and use on release instead of on click. That's the mouse action of clicking and releasing on the button, because the on release will actually let your users cancel the action by, before they release it, dragging away from the button. If you use the on click, they don't have that option to cancel. So we also have some other events here for on rollover, when they roll over the button with their mouse, and when they roll off the button with their mouse. These other two options here on focus and on blur relate only to PDFs, and the focus, let me just bring up this PDF we looked at in the previous lesson. Now if I hit my tab button, you notice that I get this little dotted outline around this hyperlink right here. This is now in focus. So buttons focus the same way as hyperlinks. So if we set an action on focus, when somebody hits tab and focuses on that button, that's when the action will occur. If it is the action, or excuse me, the event on blur, that's when the focus leaves the particular button. So if they tab to the button and then they hit tab again and the highlight or the focus leaves that button, that's considered a blur. So just so you know the difference between those two. Now, once we have an event decided on here, let's say on release, we need to determine an action that we want our button to perform. Now, when we click this little plus sign right here, we can add an action to this particular event. Now, we can add one action, we can add multiple actions to that event. We can actually add we can add any number of actions to this particular event, and then switch over to maybe another event and add actions to it as well. So let's again go to the on release event here, and let's click the plus sign. Now, there's a lot of different actions here, but you need to understand how they're grouped together. So the top half of these actions will work with either PDFs or with Flash files. This next grouping, sort of below this grayed out Swift only, animation through go to previous state, these are going to only work with Flash files. And down here under PDF only, these four options here, these are only going to work with PDF files. So there's some very specific actions here, depending on what you want your button to do. Now, there's no way we're going to be able to cover each and every one of these actions in this lesson, but we will actually be looking at several of these as we create buttons in upcoming lessons. So I tell you what, let's do for this test button, let's go ahead and assign this Go to Destination option. Now again, this is going to work for both PDFs and Flash files when we output our document, but when we select that here, notice some additional options become available to us here. Now, the number of options and what type of options they are vary depending on the action, but you can see here that the Go to Destination action actually gives us a document, and again, we can drop this down to select a different document if we had those documents open. We could click the folder icon to browse to it, but we have some destinations here that we can choose from. We're going to go to this destination. Let's choose the goodbye destination here. Now we have a whole list of destinations here. Where did those come from? These actually came from the bookmarks that we created earlier in this course. If you remember, we've got bookmarks for each page in our document. So we're able to select one of those bookmark destinations here as for this particular go to destination action on our button. Now, again, the inherit zoom is only going to apply to PDFs, so I'll just go ahead and say fit to window. And now that we have applied an action to our button, we're ready to go ahead and preview it. Now, you're probably going to be using the preview panel quite a bit, and to preview this particular action, we're going to need to preview the entire document. Now, there's a button right here that will link us to the preview panel, but we need to make sure that we have the correct option selected to preview the entire document. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the play button here, and there we go. InDesign has generated our preview. You can see here when we mouse over this big button that we've created, we get our rollover state, and when we click on that button, it takes us to the goodbye page in our layout here. So you can see that that button is functioning exactly how we set it up. Now, buttons are going to be a really important thing, like I said, for you to master creating. Not only mastering how to create buttons, but how to creatively implement them throughout your layout. Now, there's one other feature I want to go ahead and show you, and it is in the Buttons panel. If we come up here to the panel menu and look at the PDF options for a button, you can see here that we can actually specify a caption here that'll appear when that button's moused over in the PDF. So I'm not going to do that though. I just wanted to let you know that that option is there. It is available for you. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to go ahead and spend a little bit of time practicing creating buttons here. What I'd like to go ahead and do, beginning in the next lesson, we'll go ahead and create some page navigation buttons here for our document.